Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with the first Market Watch episode of the year 2022. I hope that all of you guys did have a great holiday season and got to spend some time with the people that you love. Of course, though, we are back on that Yu-Gi-Oh grind, and even through the holidays, we saw a ton of different card prices fluctuating on the market. There was a ton of really exciting new support announced for some old themes and archetypes, which are sure to give them a big boost and hopefully make some of them relevant again in 2022. Let's get started. So first up, let's take a look at Celine Queen of the Master Magicians. This card is a Link 3 that can special summon back a spellcaster from your graveyard. Not a super complicated effect. Now this card is actually going up for two different reasons. The first is that for the Pendulum deck, this opens up zones that you can Pendulum summon into, which is especially important since Pendulums are getting new support in Dimension Forced. Also, most notably, this is kind of like a bridge between Beyond the Pendulum, which is the new Pendulum Link monster that's coming out in Dimension Force, and Appaloosa, since you can bring out Appaloosa so that you don't get your board wiped out by Nibiru when you conduct your Pendulum summon. This is also a useful extra deck piece in the Sky Striker deck, helping to turn Halki Fibrax into Access Code Talker for OTKs, a really clutch play that can win you games just like DeMar DeRozan. Really good card in both strategies, and this card only has the one printing from back in Dual Overload, which came out about 2 years ago, and as a result we are seeing this card up at $30 each, which is pretty crazy considering that historically this card has fluctuated in price between around $10 to $20. This is probably going to be reprinted within the next couple of reprint sets, so probably not something you want to hold onto too many copies of, though it's definitely a card that you should own your one copy of if you want to play either Sky Strikers or Pendulums. Speaking of Pendulums, let's next take a look at Performapal Celestial Magician. This card has a lot of text on it, but I think its most notable effect comes from when it is a monster on the field. It has an ignition effect that you can activate during the turn in which it is normal or special summoned, depending on the type of monster that you have on the field. There's a few different things, but in my opinion, the most notable one is if you have a Synchro on the board, because Celestial Magician would stop your opponent from activating monster effects for the rest of the turn, which is kind of insane. Now, depending on what you're playing against, this card can be really devastating. I think most notably it stops your opponent from dropping hand traps on you like Jorlin Lockbird or Nibiru. However, to be fair, there is a decent chance that if you have this on the board and a Synchro, you've probably already summoned 5 times, so who knows. But really notably, this card could be used in the mid and late game as well to stun your opponent out, so it's definitely something to keep an eye out for. Anyways, this card has one printing from Legendary Duelist 6 Magical Hero, the set that brought us Magician Souls, and it was a super rare in that set. However, with Legendary Duelist Season 3 announced to be coming out in June, it is incredibly likely that this card will be reprinted and made much more affordable, and that is coming out just a month after Dimension Force brings us the new Pendulum support. This card is currently $8 a piece right now, which isn't too bad, so if you want to play Pendulums with your higher rarity original printings of the cards, it's fine if you want to keep them, but if you don't care much for Pendulums, you might want to offload this card now before the reprint makes the card much more accessible and consequently brings its price way down. Alright, so next up we are on to Preda Practice, which shouldn't be too much of a surprise since we have talked about a few different Predaplant cards over the last couple of weeks. Preda Practice is a pretty crazy normal spell card for the strategy, letting you special summon a Predaplant from your hand and then searching for a Predap card from your deck, but then locking you into fusions for the rest of the turn. This card is really good since it searches literally any tool or missing combo piece that you need straight out of the deck, and the deck mostly just fusion summons anyways, so the restriction isn't really that big of a deal. We've actually seen a ton of different Predaplant buyouts over the last couple of weeks, cards like Chimera Flesia and Trifio Veritum, so this card with only one printing being targeted for a buyout shouldn't come as much of a surprise. It's currently $13 each, whereas historically this card has only been $1 or $2, which tells us that there are quite a few people that are really interested in Predaplants with the new support and the potential that they show. However, just like Celestial Magician, it's important to remember that this is another card that we're expecting to be reprinted in Legendary Duelist Season 3, which will inevitably bring its price way back down. I personally feel like this card is still going to fall in price over the next couple of months, even before the reprint officially comes out, because I don't really think that Predaplants are going to be top tier or too meta relevant, and that just kind of caps how high the card's price can actually settle at. If you have any extra copies of this card, now is definitely the time to offload them while there's some hype around the strategy before the card gets reprinted. Next up, we're actually going to move on to a different plant archetype, and we're looking at Sylvan Hermetry. So Sylvans are actually getting some new support in Dimension Force as well, in the form of a link monster that allows you to excavate 3 cards from the top of your deck, and then special summon 2 plant monsters that you find, though those monsters cannot be used as link material. This is pretty crazy because there is no restriction on the monster, so you can summon high-level monsters like Hermetry for free, and Hermetry is also really cool because it lets you excavate yet another card, and then if that card is a plant, you get to dump it and then draw another card for free. It's also worth noting that with the new Sylvan Link, you can modify the levels of monsters that the Sylvan Link points to, so if you have Hermetry in your graveyard, you can turn 2 monsters that the Sylvan Link points to into a rank 8 monster. I don't know exactly how the deck is going to look or what the combos are for now, since the new support was just revealed a couple of days ago, but whatever it is, I'm sure that Hermetry is definitely going to be a 3 of in updated Sylvan decks. Because of this, we've seen both versions of Hermetry spike in price. The original Ultras from Legacy of the Valiant are now $15 each, and the reprint Ultras from the Megatins are $12 each, which is a lot more than the couple of bucks that they've been sitting at for the longest time. The card hasn't been printed since back in 2014, so almost a full 8 years ago, which is why both printings of the card are quite difficult to find. I think that as we get closer to the release of Dimension Force, we'll definitely see some Sylvan cards reprinted in something like an OTS tournament pack, but with so many different Sylvan cards not having seen reprints in so long, which ones we'll actually see is anybody's guess. If I were you guys, even if I wanted to play Sylvans, I would wait a month or two for some of the initial hype around the card to die down before picking this card up, and maybe even consider waiting until we've seen the reprints from a set like Ghost from the Past 2 before going crazy on too many copies of this card. We could definitely see multiple Sylvan reprints in a set like that, kind of the same way that we saw Cosmos get reprinted in the first one. Another plant monster that is trending upwards on the market is Aromaceraphy Jasmine, a link monster that you can make with any 2 plants. I guess in theory this card could be used in Sylvans or Preda plants, but regardless, this card is an insane boost for any plant deck that decides to use it. It can be brought out really easily with either Evil Thorn or the Ophrys Scorpio combo. This allows you to tribute a monster that it points to summon any plant monster from your deck, which is kind of insane. It doesn't even negate the effect of the monster it summons, so this basically turns any monster on your field into a copy of Lone Fire Blossom. I think that just from reading this card, it's pretty easy to see how good it is, and that's why over the past couple of years since its release, the card has seen multiple attempted waves of buyouts. However, none of them have really stuck because the right meta deck to abuse this card just hasn't come along to bring this card into the meta. However, with 2 big plant decks getting support later this year, it just might be Jasmine's time to shine, and we are now seeing Jasmine up at $6 to $7 a piece on TCG Player. The card does have only the 1 printing available from Dual Power, and assuming that the card doesn't get a reprint anytime soon, I could definitely see this card hitting $10 to $12 within the next few months. However, I also think that if plants are getting decent support from multiple archetypes, then maybe there's a chance that Jasmine sees a reprint anyways to improve its accessibility to the player base. Definitely a cool card. If you guys have this card sitting around in your bulk from when it was only a couple of dollars, it might now finally be time to dig this card up and have the card ready to sell if it continues to see hype over the next little while. Next, we're taking a look at a card that doesn't really need an introduction. We have RedEyes Dark Dragoon, so I feel like since the release of Destroy Phoenix Enforcer, Dragoon is a card that just hasn't really seen much play in today's meta, with a lot more players choosing to use DPE. You aren't as dependent on Verte Anaconda since Fusion Destiny is easier to use than RedEyes Fusion, and the bricks that you play can actually be useful while they're in the graveyard. Because of this, we were starting to see Dragoon trend downwards in price. Within the last few weeks, however, we've started to see Dragoon trend back upwards, which I believe is largely due to the branded Despia deck. Dragoon is actually a card that the deck can make quite easily, using the combo that we discussed last week with Branded Fusion and the Light Hex Sealed Fusion. With the decline in play this format and the Starlight Rare reprint that Dragoon received in Brothers of Legend, it definitely seems incredibly unlikely that Dragoon is going to be hit on the upcoming ban list as well, which has led to players being a little bit more confident in picking up their copies of this card. All of this has led to Dragoon being back up at around $105 a piece, a $20 jump from the $80 to $85 that we were seeing this card at just a couple of months ago. Given how iconic this card is, and the fact that we're also getting Dark Magician support in Battle of Chaos, and that's a strategy that also uses Dragoon, we should expect Dragoon to continue to be expensive for the foreseeable future. And finally, the last card we have to talk about for today's episode is Artemis, the Magistus Moon Maiden. So of course, in the Grand Creators, I feel like everyone is really hyped for the Brave Token stuff and even the Inzectors, but we don't see too many people talking about the Exo Sisters. However, I think that the deck is still really cool, and as a waifu archetype, you can't underestimate how popular it will be with the player base. Also, Yassine just recently posted an Exo Sister deck profile on his channel, which makes the deck look really cool, so make sure that you guys check that out as well. Now, Artemis is a Link 1 Link monster that I believe Yassine was running 2 copies of, as he was running a small Magistus package as well. If you equip Artemis to Zorora, you can effectively stun your opponent out of Link monsters, which is really cool. Artemis is also seeing play in some invoked builds as well, as it's a light material that you can use for Mechaba and summon with Alistair, so depending on if invoked finally gets hit on the upcoming ban list, that might be 2 reasons for Artemis to be more highly sought after. Now, Artemis only has the 1 printing as an ultra rare from Genesis Impact, and as a result it's sitting at $17 each on TCG Player at the moment. The Magistus archetype is one that hasn't really received much love or attention over the last while, being greatly overshadowed in Genesis Impact by both the Gyratrons and Evil Twins, so there is a chance that we might have to wait quite some time before this card gets reprinted. Of course, we could also hope that it gets reprinted in the Grand Creators itself, but whether or not that actually happens is anybody's guess. Alright guys, that is it for today's episode. Lots of really cool new support for a ton of different older archetypes. Looks like it's all coming in Dimension Force. I personally am really excited for Sylvan's, since I really liked it back in the day, back when Lone Fire Blossom and Soul Charge basically meant that you were winning the game. But it looks like there's going to be a lot of stuff for everyone, regardless of what style of deck you like playing, which is really awesome and exciting to see. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch, please make sure that you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button for me. Also make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys think about the cards that we talked about today and what other cards are trending on the market so I can cover them in a future episode as well. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself here on the channel. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.